Chapter 22, the restoration. Uh, what is this the restoration of? Putin as president, right, after the famine. So it begins the chapter with the incident at the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, the Pussy Riot, so-called punk rock prayer to deliver Russia from Putin. And, that had serious consequences for those young women that were involved. Um, let's see, what else we can tell in this chapter? Interestingly enough, it talks here, and this is just in passing, about the Orthodox Church coming back, the new Patriarch Kirill, and how he has become close with Putin because Putin has used the Russian Orthodox Church as a pillar of support for his new regime. So, and this is why I've said in some ways Russia has gone back to the slogan that was associated with Nicholas I: autocracy, orthodoxy, nationalism. All right, and it refers here in this chapter to this crazy right-wing fascist supporter Ivan Ilin, who is supposedly this crazy philosopher, now dead, but he was enamored by the Nazis. He lived in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and he thought that Russia was going to be this totally unique civilization that would draw many of the aspects of fascism, but it would be purer and holier because it was Russia. It's a bizarre thing, but this feeds Putin's desire, I think, to be um, the leader of a strong, unique nation that has its own role and its own way to carry out policy. Um, so um, you can again, it talks about Christ's church and the Pussy Riot, etc. It talks about his Putin's inauguration, and interestingly, that when he was last inaugurated, there was a lot of pomp and ceremony, um, but this time he the streets were deserted when he traveled to the Kremlin to be sworn in. Um, okay, and in this section then around 210, 211, it talks a lot about uh, Putin and how he has changed over time, some of the goals that he had in 2001, how they changed slightly under Medvedev in 2008, and now he's returning, taking the oath for the third time, and trying to unite the country in his way. So you want to understand that, and you begin to see from 211 on these increasing authoritarian practices that Putin is involved in, how he's cracking down on dissent, using mass arrest that wasn't the style before 2012. So understand that, read those sections very carefully, be able to give examples if you find a question on the exam that talks about the increasing authoritarianism of the regime. Um, so this is a rather short chapter, but I'm going to go on and talk on chapter 23, Alone on Olympus. Alone on Olympus. And it begins, strangely enough, given the fact that Putin is manipulating the Constitution in 2020 to be able to stay on. This chapter begins with talking about how in 2012 he reached the official retirement age in Russia, and he certainly wasn't planning to retire. It does discuss about how many in the West perceive Medvedev as going to be a reformer, a different type of leader than Putin as president, and he did some things that he was quite proud of, and yet when Putin comes back to the presidency, he goes about dismantling those reforms, those changes that Medvedev put in, and it begins talking about the real effort to to put Medvedev back in his place as number two, and to elevate um, Putin again. Um, it talks here also in this chapter about another sign of the increasing separation between Russia and this is 2012-13 separation of Russia from the West. It talks about the banning of USAID, that's the U.S. Agency for International Development, that they had offices in Russia. This was part of the effort after the collapse of the Soviet Union to help bring Russia into the world economy as a market economy. And so they had offices there. They were very much involved in giving aid and assistance to deal with the AIDS epidemic, because that has been a serious problem in Russia. Uh, and then this was an element of the American government, and Putin wanted no agencies of the American government traveling around Russia and Russian territory, forced them out um, as part of this increasing separation. Chapter goes on talking about Magnitsky and the problems there. But what I want to focus upon is this increasing, as the chapter talks about, this increasing cult of personality around Putin. That everything, particularly on his 60th birthday, you saw this this glorification, this raising him up, this Putin as the hero. Now, some of that has to do with all the videos that were created of him, deep sea diving in the Black Sea, helping to get these Canadian geese or some birds to their nesting place, riding horseback, bare-chested, showing how macho this guy is, building this up, and this fits in with Putin. One of the big mistakes I think that Obama made when he was president regarding Russia was that he made this remark that Russia is not a world power anymore. At best it's a regional power, and that was at the time a very true statement. But that did not go down well with Putin. Putin wants to be seen as one of the most important men in the world. He wants to be, that's one of the reasons why they wanted to be involved in the World Trade Organization, um, because that was thought to be part of that. That's where the big countries get together and discuss major events. He wants to be at the table at any major international meeting. He wants to be respected, and I think Obama was fed up with Putin's increasing aggressiveness and just kind of dismissed it and said, they're a regional power, not a world power. That did not go well. I think that was a serious mistake on his part, because I think Putin is so sensitive. You don't want to insult him. It's only going to make relations worse. So you see this need for him to be number one. He has to be the focus of attention. He has to be the be all and end all. And that's you see that running through this chapter. You see that running through all aspects of his life. But the chapter talks about alone on Olympus, and there is a section in this chapter that emphasizes that when you see photos of Putin, it's always Putin alone. All the videos are Putin, Putin on the horse that he's riding, Putin on the tiger that he's petting, Putin on the jug that he has brought up from the bottom of the Black Sea. You don't see crowds around him. You don't see his wife. Of course, they're separated. They're divorced by now, but you didn't see his wife. You didn't see close personal friends. Everything is Putin, Putin, Putin. And Olympus, is where the Greek gods supposedly lived. So it's an interesting title. Here is Putin, elevated, this great, important person, but he's always alone. He's by himself. He's on Mount Olympus, totally alone. All right. Last thing of importance in this chapter is the Snowden affair, where he grants, where Putin grants asylum to Snowden, and this also really offended the Obama administration that Snowden was perceived as a security threat. He had been a contractor for the CIA. He leaked a lot of documents. He was involved with WikiLeaks. And this really was really a sore point between the Obama administration and the Putin administration. So the relations with the West are pretty much fractured at this point. All right. Then we begin chapter 24 with the title Putingrad. You know, we've had Leningrad and Stalingrad, and now Putingrad. The interesting thing, where is Putingrad in Russia? Because this chapter talks a lot about what event? The Winter Olympics. You know, the Winter Olympics. And I've told you, I want you to understand why. His matter does talk about this at several points, why the Winter Olympics were so important to him. More than just for the political spectacle, but why are they critical to him? And then, obviously, as you read this chapter, you'll know where he talks about the crisis that exploded right before the end of the Sochi Olympics. And you know what that crisis was. That was the crisis in Ukraine in 2014, in February 2014, where the Maidan protest and Yanukovych's government tried to crack down, killed a number of the protesters, and that backfired. That only brought more people into the streets, and eventually Yanukovych flees the country, and you have a new government being created in Ukraine. But it is obviously a government that wants to be affiliated with the West, not with the Russians, not in the East. Which this then provokes the intervention in Crimea. And it talks in here about the small group of people that Putin consults, and in some ways this made me think of back to the years of the Brezhnev regime, when they intervened in Afghanistan, that this was Brezhnev, again relying upon a very small group of people, not the Politburo, small group of people to make this decision to invade. And Brezhnev was misled by his general staff because they thought, oh, we'll go in, we'll topple this president, we'll put our own guy in place, and he'll take charge of the country, and it'll be over in a matter of days, if not weeks. Well, that didn't happen, and despite the fact that the intervention in Chechnya has generally gone in Putin's favor, there is still this lingering resentment and occasionally these terrorist activities by dissidents in Chechnya. So this is still a problem. And here you have him intervening, taking this major step of reclaiming the sorry, the computer is zacking up here. Reclaiming control of the country, bringing Crimea back to Russia, and he doesn't get but a handful of people, and these people are his old friends from the KGB. These are close people that he's been with since the 70s and 80s, and that's the extent of his consultation and who he relies upon. And this is a disturbing factor because they acknowledge in this chapter that Putin is relying more and more on a small number of people, small number of advisors. That his, I think the phrase is, the funnel of information that he gets is very narrow. And so this is a man who doesn't have a lot of experience with the West, and has his own views of Russia as an important power. And now he's relying upon a more narrow view of a group of advisors. Also, a term you need to know is Novorossiya. 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 Discussed it here as a term that goes back to Catherine the Great, that was used by Catherine and her advisors, that talked about how the southern part of what is now Ukraine, and particularly Crimea, could become New Russia, that this was new land that was being brought into the Russian Empire by Catherine, military victories. And Putin tries this idea out. You find initially after the occupation of Crimea that they're talking about this was always part of Russia. This is part of Russia. And doesn't go very far. It's pretty much dropped from the conversation. But I wanted you to have that in mind, to have that linkage back to the history, because there's, you did suffer through those early lectures on the Tsarist Empire. But you see how the history comes back and it's relevant in the present. All right. Then you go over on towards the end of the chapter. I think it's on 473, 475. Yeah, 473. Uh, you know that the strategist, the uh, public relations man that was influential, um, Vladislav Surkov, the one who came up with managed democracy, that term, has been replaced in 2014 by a new strategist. Um, and the new strategy, one of the terms they've come up with, there is Putin and there is Russia. And this is interesting because the opponents at below the square were many times had signs up, uh, Russia da Putin yet, or no Putin, yes Russia. Um, so here he's trying to play off on that, saying that basically Putin is the indispensable man. He is the one that you have to have the center of everything in Russia. And that's the theme of this regime. And Putin obviously believes it. And I think that's why he's trying to stay in power as long as 2036. I mean, he just doesn't want to give up power. And also, some of that probably relates to one of the lectures I'm going to give about Putin's cronies and the Panama Papers and Putin's wealth. Um, I'll talk about that after we finish the period of 2018, 19, and 20, at least up to present in 20. All right. Again, on 274, it comes reference to Putin's need for respect. He wants to be honored. He wants to be respected. And he doesn't think that the West gives his country enough respect. It doesn't give him enough personal respect. Also, 275 is this great line. For Putin, the personal had become policy. And boy, when you begin to think that a president who takes everything personally has to see himself as the focal point of everything, how much closer to the czars are we with Putin than with any concept of democracy as we know it. Hence the Myers title, The New Czar. Now, we can debate that and argue it that, but certainly the czar, the autocrat, made the decision. Now, there are lots of people around the czars who gave advice and consultation, etc., had to depend upon to carry out policy. I don't believe Putin has the authority of a czar, because I think he has to rely upon so many groups around him. I think he's managing, as the book talks about, the clans, these groups of people who are allied with him, and he's the balancer. He keeps them in check. And I see him more as the balancer rather than the absolute autocrat. But he certainly does like to act autocratically. And as he appears to be now, the new indispensable man has to be involved in everything. And Volodin, the new strategist in the Kremlin who's helping him, seems to be able to push that. All right. So this is a chapter that is very short, but unfortunately it's the last one. And the only problem I have with the book is that it really ends basically in 2014, gives you a little discussion of 2015, but there's not a whole lot there except that on the next to last page, at the bottom, there's this line: Putin's rule was no more permanent now than it had been inevitable, yet it seemed inexorable. Look up the definition of inexorable. Understand what that means for the way Putin is perceived and the way he perceives Russia. And further on the last page, it says the fate of Russia is now entwined with his own, Putin's fate, rushing forward as the Troika in Gogol's Dead Souls to an unknown destiny. Um, they are linked together. He sees them linked together, and honestly, I don't see any other option right now with Putin. There's no one else in the horizon, but perhaps we'll speculate a little on that in the last lecture. All right, so this is the last readings. We've covered the Sarkwa book, covered the virus book now. My last lecture ended, I think, in 2017. Uh, so the next day or so, I'm going to post the next series of lectures, one or two lectures that'll take us up to the present. And then I want to discuss Putin and his cronies in a separate lecture and reflect on the regime. Uh, but I'm coming to the end of my active part here. Of course, I have to make up an exam for you too. But uh, I hope you're reading the book in conjunction to these lectures and following almost page by page along. I think that'll make more sense. I think it'll help you to retain that information. So I'm going to end this now, and next one will be in a day or so.